President Joe Biden has intervened to stop what could have been an absolutely massive strike of railroad workers. Well, over 100,000 workers had been set to strike after working for apparently years to improve their positions, their quality in life, and he is going to stop that. But for who?
Is the American freight railroad industry headed for a wreck? President Biden issued a sweeping executive order allegedly to promote competition in various sectors of the economy. One of the targets is railroads. The White House's focus here woefully is misdirected. It could derail one of the country's great success stories of the last 40 years.
An executive order from President Biden has prevented a national railroad strike for now. It would involve about 115,000 workers and stall 30% of the nation's freight. And the last time there was a strike of this level, it cost $1 billion a day. Union leaders say the railroads have been making big money, but the workers have gone more than 3 years without a raise. The president's order gives another 60 days to work things out, but experts say a strike is likely.
All right, there's a new plan to end a railroad contract dispute and involves giving workers pay bumps and thousands of dollars in bonuses.
Independent recommendations on pay and benefits are out, and the two sides have until September 16th to reach an agreement before work stoppages are permitted. But railroaders demand strike action as pro-management Presidential Emergency Board declares workers have no claim to share in record profits.
I'm sick and tired of smart guys. I'm sick of this stuff. Fewer, not more, fewer. They build America, and unions build them.
And there are reports that railroaders are furious with Tuesday's Presidential Emergency Board report, in which a panel of Biden-appointed mediators sided with management on virtually every single point in a contract dispute. The ruling proposed wage increases below the rate of inflation and upheld the right of management to unilaterally impose punishing attendance policies that have driven tens of thousands out of the industry. Now, the deal also removes caps on employee monthly contributions to the healthcare program, paving the way for massive increases in premiums. The Presidential Emergency Board was appointed last month by Biden under the powers created by the Anti-Worker Railway Labor Act, RLA. This century-old law all but bans strikes on U.S. railroads by imposing endless rounds of mandatory mediation, arbitration, and cooling off periods. Because of this law, railroaders have been forced to work without a new contract for nearly 3 years. One angry railroad worker said, "This is a slap in the face." He said he's a single father with full custody, and he's been on the railroad for 16 years.
What would you do if there was a child right in front of you?
You lost your child. It's gone.
He's never had a weekend off unless he used vacation, and he gets points for being sick with a doctor's note. And he gets points for his son being sick as well with a doctor's note, saying that one personal day does absolutely nothing for him, and they need to strike regardless of what Congress does. And I hate to hear these stories because at some point I would have to start planning for myself and looking to find a better job or career that aligns more with my own personal goals. But he's right. One personal day isn't enough because he will more than likely spend most of that day traveling just to get back home and will then have to turn right back around and go back to work. And another railroad worker explained one of the biggest threats is removing the cap of our insurance premiums, claiming that the railroads are self-insured and they put a value on what our health plan or our health care plan is worth. And he said that by manipulating the numbers, they can increase our monthly contributions to offset the wage increases. And he said the companies aren't stupid. They know this, and they know this will be a vulnerable tool in the future, at least a valuable tool in the future. Some railroad workers are saying that they need to strike regardless of what Congress decides, and the hell with the RLA, adding that workers' rights were not founded on lawful action to begin with, and that they will not be won by conceding to the wants of a corrupt establishment now. And I hate to break it to these guys, but this whole world is pretty much a corrupt establishment. And another worker said he sees his family 4 days a month, and they have moved 3 times in 8 years for the railroad. And he is pro-strike, and said if they throw him in jail, then there still won't be anybody to work for the railroads. And the worst part about this is dealing with the legal consequences of wanting better employment and working conditions, but having your hands tied out of a fear of imprisonment. Well, a different type of imprisonment, because it sounds like working on the railroad is almost the equivalent of a life sentence. But he has a point. If they throw them in jail, who will run the trains? And let's not forget the importance and how vital these workers are, since rail workers are the exact reason the whole country moves and runs. Rail workers, truck drivers, dock workers at the ports, they're all part of the supply chain.
Especially as workers have gone without a raise since 2019. And this could even make it easier for these rail companies to hire more workers. But aside from this negotiation, there's also the other negotiation that's happening between the dock workers and the shipping operators on the West Coast.
And let's not forget the importance and how vital these workers are, since rail workers are the exact reason the whole country moves and runs. Rail workers, truck drivers, dock workers at the ports, they're all part of the supply chain, not the CEOs in Congress. They just take all the money. But the Biden administration is only doing what they say is best for national interests, which means they could give a damn about the people breaking their backs 24/7, as long as those assholes in Washington don't feel any real pain themselves.
I convinced people to vote for it. So let's get those things straight, too. Focus on this man, what he's doing, that no president has ever done.
And in a carefully worded statement Wednesday, in which the railroads attempted to hide their happiness and excitement over the decision, the Association of American Railroads called for a deal based on the PEB's recommendations, stating that while Biden PEB's recommendations did exceed the rail carrier's proposal, they provide a useful basis to reach a resolution, and that an agreement based on these terms would lead to the largest general wage increase in nearly 40 years. But in reality, the 22% wage increase over 5 years proposed by the PEB would be more than eaten up by inflation, currently at least 8.5%, and wouldn't be so seemingly large now if they have not been screwed and passed over these workers for the past several years. One highly revealed claim made by management during the PEB hearings, summarized in the final report, provoked particular anger amongst the railroaders, and it was that the carriers maintain the capital investment and risk, which are the reasons for their profits, and not due to any contributions from the labor. Ouch. Damn, that's cold. The PEB report said that carriers assert that since employees have been fairly and adequately paid for their efforts, then they have no claim to share in the profits. And from a recent release by a railroad supporting media outlet, they explained that from the standpoint of basic economics, the claim that the railroad's profits do not come from labor is a self-serving lie, stating that, as first explained over 150 years ago by Marx, all profits are ultimately derived from the exploration of the working class, measured by the difference between the value of workers' wages and the value they produce during the working day. And that extreme levels of exploration are why the railroad industry, in spite of massive delays and congestion, is the most profitable in the country, with a 50% profit margin posted in 2019. That's strong. Now, this ruling is preparing everyone for a showdown between railroad workers on one side and the railroads, the pro-corporate unions, and the government and Democrats on the other side.
But from this point on, now it goes to the rail workers, rail companies, and the workers.
And the railroad workers and their families believe that the self-serving lies of the union bureaucracy, calling on workers to place their trust in the Railroad Labor Act, the Democrats, and the White House are being shattered. Assuming the contract is voted down, Congress, for the moment, still controlled by the Democrats, will intervene in a bid to block a strike. And coincidentally, this would take place around the time of the midterm elections, creating an overlapping eruption of class struggle and political crisis. One railroad worker said that we've been told our whole adult lives to vote for your job and your wallet. But it seems that the do-nothing Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans and their big business friends working against labor. But what they don't seem to realize is that without labor, the whole thing falls apart. In this case, who's going to move the freight? The entire country will suffer because of this. And another worker said, this is a perfect storm, and it shows the true colors of the railroads, the unions, and our useless White House. And the bottom line is, we, the people, don't matter to any of them. And that this whole process is a joke. And if it were up to him, he would walk away from all three of these groups, but sadly, he can't. He said that the railroad uses and abuses us on a daily basis, and the unions are just high-paid con men, and the president is nothing more than just a clown.
This is the guy that's unhinged. He is unhinged.